Committee, is there any questions? Any objection? Seeing none, we'll make the request. Next on the agenda is the hearing on Senate Bill 252. Amelia, do you mind? Thanks. Senator Reddy.
Sorry, Madam Chair. I just wanted to take a point of privilege, if I could, to introduce.
Absolutely. A point of personal privilege to Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have 6 pages here in the room. Would you please stand up? They're from Manhattan Ogden USD 383, Laney, Riley, Bree, Eli, Trax, and Sawyer. I hope I have your names right. Thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you, and welcome to the Tax Committee. And Senator, you did have their names right, because as you read their names, each one of them smiled. So.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, would it be possible to close that door? I can just hear.
I think that would be great. We have some feedback between the two rooms.
Thank you. All right. Good morning. Senate Bill number 252 would provide a property tax exemption for certain business property operated in competition with property owned or operated by a government entity. It would also provide a sales tax exemption for certain businesses competing against government entities. New Section 1 of the bill would establish, for tax years commencing after December 31 of 2023, a property tax exemption for all real property owned and operated by a business in the state that is used by the business for ambulance service, child care center, entertainment, exercise, health club, recreation, or restaurant purposes, and is located within a county where there is at least one facility owned or operated by a government entity that competes against the business. And such competing facility owned or operated by a government entity is also exempt from ad valorem property taxes. The section further provides definitions for competes against the business, facility owned or operated by a government entity, and real property owned and operated by a business. I will point out that competes against the business means offering the same or substantially the same goods or services to the public and receiving payment for those goods and services. It does not include providing services and goods without receiving payment or providing such goods and services only to its own employees or students. Facility owned or operated by a government entity includes any facility owned or operated by the state, any county, city, township, school district, community college, municipal university, public university, or any other taxing district or political subdivision that is supported with tax funds, or any other facility that receives funds from property or ad valorem taxes levied by a taxing subdivision. Section 2 of the bill would amend KSA 793606, our sales tax exemption statute, to provide a sales tax exemption for all sales of tangible personal property and or services purchased by a business that owns or operates real property in the state that is used by the business for those services I enumerated earlier, and is also located within a county where there's at least one competing government entity facility. And that such government competing facility owned or operated by the government entity is also exempt from property tax. And that the tangible personal property or services also be used for the ambulance service, child care center, entertainment purposes. The sales tax exemption also includes an exemption for all sales of tangible personal property or services by such business at or from such real property location. The bill also provides, in relation to the sales tax exemption, that the business shall apply to and obtain from the Secretary of Revenue an exemption certificate for their purchases or sales prior to claiming the exemption. And for your information, in relation to the property tax exemption, we currently do have in place statutory provisions governing how to apply for a property tax exemption, which involves making an application to the county appraiser, which is then forwarded to the Board of Tax Appeals for their review and consideration. And the bill would take effect from and after publication in the statute book, and I would be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Amelia. Committee, any questions? Senator Corson.
Question really for research would be, do any other states offer this type of a tax structure where we give these exemptions? I'd be curious what other states do, same or similar. Thank you.
Thank you. Eddie, would you mind looking into that for us? Not now. You can send it. Thank you. Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And maybe this is for the Riser Research, I'm not sure. What is the definition of governmental entity as this particular bill would apply to?
Amelia.
This particular bill, you will see on page 1, there is a definition of facility owned or operated by a government entity. And it means any facility owned or operated by the state of Kansas, any county, city, township, school district, community college, municipal university, public university, or any other taxing district or political subdivision of the state that is supported with tax funds, or it is any other facility that receives any funds from property or ad valorem taxes levied by a taxing subdivision.
Thank you. Senator Holland.
Just a brief follow-up. So say if we have public-private partnerships, would that fall into the realm of, well, as a government operator-owned entity?
Amelia.
If it meets the definition provided in the statute, I can't predict what the situation would be.
Right. Thank you. Senator Holland.
And then just a request for Eddie to follow one. I like to drive things by NAICS codes. Can you figure out for me by NAICS code, what is the loss on sales tax revenue and what is basically the loss on commercial property revenue? If this bill could be estimated. Obviously, there is no state general fund, but that's why I'm concerned about shifting the burden onto other taxpayers. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And thank you, Senator. Right now, it would be none, as there are none that have applied for it. But Eddie might be able to find a few to give you an example throughout the state, because there are several. Committee, any other questions? Senator Baumgardner.
Well, there we go. So the 19 community colleges and our Regents institutions that have cafeterias, does that mean that all counties where these are located that have restaurants, that they would have that tax credit?
Thank you, Senator. Let's save those questions for the conferees, and we'll ask research to look into that. Thank you. Committee, any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Amelia. Committee, our first conferee is President Masterson. Welcome again to the Tax Committee. This is awesome.
Yeah. Well, this is why you guys are here, right? You're supposed to work all this out for me. Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity to testify. And for the record, I had asked the chairman to try to put it together a bill on government competition because it is explicit in the Republican platform. Government should not compete. You look it up, Section 9, should not compete against private enterprise. Now to the details, right? What do those nuances look like? Because there are times, particularly rurally, where it might make sense for a government entity to provide a service in a way that might otherwise, but the key to this is competition. It's, are you competing against a private enterprise? And really, you need to look, I'd like you to look at the timing as well, because it's also different. For example, a bill that would prohibit competition, you need to look at timing in the sense if, scenario one, you have a private business that exists, then a government comes in using the tax resources of the business paying it to create direct competition with it. That should never happen. Flip side, you have a place where government has provided a service and it's aware, and people are aware, and a business comes in. That's different because you're coming in heads up trying to compete, right? So I want you to look at timing, but there really is, and you pick your thing. Competition exists, and it's probably more of an issue in the metropolitan areas, right? Than it, because rurally, if you got I don't know, public swimming pool, right? Nobody's going to build a private swimming pool, or, but daycare's an issue. I mean, pick your thing. The one I think everybody likes to talk about is kind of the health club thing, right? So, but that's an example, right? If you have a private business that has that situation, and then you use the resources from that business to create competition right next door, that is unfair. And it explicitly against the Republican platform. So we're looking for a solution. I apologize, I'd actually not read the bill but I'm trusting the chair to put something together, but I'd like this committee to work something out that actually works and is appropriate. Because there are situations in which it's not prohibiting government from providing a particular service. It's preventing preventing using someone's tax dollars to compete against them and in effect put them out of business. So for that, I'd stand for questions, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. President. And we did look at several options. I wasn't working on this as an island. And so this was where we landed because of simplicity of implementation and the possibility of interpretation. So that's why we landed in this direction.
Thank you for taking the subject matter on.
Thank you. Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here this morning.
bet.
So what if a private entity also gets IRBs from your local community for property tax abatement and sales tax abatement? If they're already taking or being exempt from those when they are building their infrastructure, as well as a city or local government helping them with that infrastructure, where would that fall in this line of thought of competition, let's say?
Well, competition has nothing to do with the incentives that are drawn. It would be, and I don't know why you would incent a competitive action, but it wouldn't prohibit that in any way.
Senator Reddy.
I have a follow-up. Thank you. I'm saying would they be exempt from this proposal as it is right now from property tax exemptions and sales?
Since I don't have this proposal in front, I don't know the answer to this in the context of this bill, but the intent would be, yeah, as long as the competition exists, the exemption would exist, because it's meant to disincentivize a government from putting one of their constituents out of business with competition.
I can ask a lot of questions, but I'm going to stop there for now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Be glad to answer them at any time.
Senator Corson.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here, Mr. President. So I went back and I read, we had legislative post-audit look into this exact issue, and I got the report from January 2022. And I wanted to just give you some of those key findings and then have you respond to those, because I think that they really disprove your entire notion that this is happening, one, and that it's having a negative effect. So here's what legislative post-audit, here's what the team found after spending hundreds of hours looking at it. They said, quote, "It can be difficult to determine which businesses compete with each other. For example, in a large city, fitness centers likely compete with other similar nearby centers rather than all fitness centers in the city." So, I mean, I think it would be crazy for us to say that Genesis Health Club in Olathe in southern Johnson County is in competition with the Merriam Community Center in northeast Johnson County, that they are somehow competing. I mean, I think that notion is really absurd. And then it says, based on the available research, competition between government, nonprofit, and for-profit businesses may exist in some industries, but is likely, quote, minimal. This is because they offer different types of services and serve different customer bases. And they look specifically at fitness centers, and they talk about how nonprofits focus on services for low-income households, such as after-school programs, while the for-profit centers focus on serving the needs of health-conscious customers. And then they also went on to say that,
Senator, do you have a question?
yeah, this is my last point. A study examining the fitness industry found that tax exemptions for nonprofit fitness centers did not lead to fewer for-profit fitness centers. So I just think that that really blows the whole purpose and notion of this bill out of the water. One, it's not happening. Two, it's not having a significant effect, but I want to give you a chance to respond to that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I want to, the body may not be aware of this, or the committee. There's actually been a restaurant, a government-started restaurant in Kansas that is competing against local restaurants. So it's not just, I just want the committee to be aware that this is spreading more than what we've heard in the past. So President Masterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When statements go that long, kind of tweaks my ADD, so I'm not sure I'm going to get everything there. But I think what I heard from the beginning was, when you read that statement, was it's difficult. It's difficult to determine. That doesn't mean we shouldn't determine it. And you say it's not happening that much. I'm saying it shouldn't happen at all. So that's why we're having this in front of you, because it really should never happen. And so because it's difficult, that's why you all are here, to take on some difficult subject matter and find a solution. So all because it's difficult doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. And all because it's not happening everywhere doesn't mean you shouldn't stop it anywhere.
Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. President, we had Mr. Stafford on the thing. Is he going to testify? Do we know? Because I have some questions I was going to direct to him.
Senator
But should I
Holland,
just give it to him?
Senator, the president would not know who the conferees are.
I'm not implying,
So-
okay, I just have I'm sorry, I have a question.
Would
for
you
the
please
Secretary.
ask the president if you have a question for him?
Okay, I want to ask Secretary first, is Mr. Stafford going to testify in this bill or not? Do we know?
Senator Holland, as I told you quietly when you asked me,
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Stafford has personal obligations right now. He may not be able to testify. He
Okay,
is on the list to testify,
Okay,
and we are all praying for his family. Thank you.
okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Okay. Mr. President, thanks for being here today. I guess a couple hypotheticals, and I want to make you aware, I guess, what I'm concerned about, the adverse effects of this bill. So let me give you a hypothetical example. If the city of Lawrence has a pool that residents pay $1 or something to get into so their kids can go swim in the summer, can a for-profit exercise entity in the same county basically say, hey, I shouldn't have to pay property taxes because I have a pool and I'm in competition with the city of Lawrence?
No, not if that pool existed prior. It wouldn't apply. If you had a for-profit swimming pool and government comes in and puts in a nonprofit swimming pool right beside him, I would say that would apply.
Okay. Second question, Madam Chair, if appropriate.
Proceed.
Thank you. So my second question would be is that if I have say an elementary school that's preparing lunches for kids or breakfast or snacks or something, is that an opportunity for a local restaurateur to say I'm unfairly competing against business?
No, that would also not apply because they're not open to the public for business. You can't walk in off the street and get anybody in there and get breakfast. It's for their entity, so that would not apply.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You bet.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so, I think we all read about Emporia State University deciding to discontinue their childcare facility. So if they at some time in the future decide to open that back up, that would then open it up with regard to daycare or childcare in that particular county.
Only if that daycare provided by ESU was for the general public and not just for ESU students or faculty, because that would not be competition.
Great, thank you, thank you.
Any other questions? Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think when we talk about property taxes and the services that local governments provide, whether it's snow removal or roads and all of these things, if we go in this direction of competition with government, I don't think anybody ever felt our local rec center was in competition with a fitness center. I've never heard that. I've heard it in this room and in environments such as this, but not outside in my own community because the demographics are different or our clientele per se are different. But when we start removing property taxes from all of them, it falls on your residents. And when we want to try to keep our houses affordable, let's say, and make sure that we're having families move into Kansas, do you think this might work against that ultimate goal for all of us to have more people coming to Kansas, having a wonderful life here, raising their family, having our children go to schools, enjoy the quality of life? Would this dampen a family to move to Kansas because now their property taxes would be escalating because businesses don't have to pay property taxes but get the same services?
So short answer is absolutely not. So, and it would depend on your situation in Manhattan. If you did have a private business that you, as the city, came in and started competition with, they'd have the opportunity to appeal that, right? To be subject from that. And the intent of this is for you to decide as a government not to do that. The choice is yours, right? You have a private facility. Now you're going in and taxing that facility to create direct competition. And that's what we can't have happen. It does not change amenities. It doesn't change tax rates. I mean, that feels like a bit of a red herring, and it certainly wouldn't, in the grand scheme of things, change the ability or anybody's desire to come to Kansas because you're putting high property tax on residents.
Senator Clays, and my apologies, Senator.
It's okay. I appreciate the opportunity to be the last questioner, perhaps. So, isn't this happening right now in Prairie Village? Isn't right now, at this moment, a big box store that was going to be converted into a health and fitness center being put on hold because the city of Prairie Village is about to create, using that taxpayers' tax dollars, a identical seemingly fitness center for the city of Prairie Village using tax dollars? Isn't that exactly what this bill is hoping to prevent and exactly what's happening right now in Kansas? Thank you, Madam Chair.
I would say, yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. That is my understanding, and in the context of the post audit, I don't find that difficult to define.
Committee, any other questions? Senator Holland.
Do we have time for more questions? Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be very brief. So I appreciate the hypothetical the senator from Saline gave. I guess I have one for you now, too. When it comes to certain health clubs operating in Douglas County, if they in fact are not current on their property tax bills, is this legislation still basically a moral hazard that basically is going to be further incentive for certain businesses who feel they qualify, they're being disparaged under this thing, not to pay their existing property tax bills? Thank you.
I would say in no way does that apply.
Thank you. And it's always interesting traveling, well, being from that area, you know that nobody's from the Saline County. Yeah.
I'll just add to that too, the definition of hypothetical means it's not actually happening. So I'm not sure the word hypothetical was appropriate to the example.
Madam Chair.
Senator Highland, yes.
Thank you. No, I was in no way intimating any operations in Saline County, specifically talking about health club facilities in Douglas County. He had mentioned the point about a health club, and so I felt it was germane to the discussion.
Yeah, Senator, my point was it's not saline, it's saline. That's all.
Is it McPherson or McPherson?
Yeah, well, that's how we know you're.
There's no fear in McPherson.
Yeah, and Osawatomie or Osawatomie? No, thank you. I was trying to bring some brevity to the situation, some lightness.
Starting to feel like
Committee.
the only conferee.
Yes, I think you are the only conferee. Any other questions for the conferee? Senator Baumgardner.
Will he be willing to carry the bill on the floor?
I think he will. I think he'd be proud to. It's a good, thank you,
work
committee.
product.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Committee, next proponent is Eric Stafford. I think Eric has a conflict this morning. Proponents written. We don't have any other proponents for the legislation. Seeing none, we'll move to opponents. Spencer Duncan, welcome to the back to the tax committee.
There we go. Spencer Duncan, League of Kansas Municipalities. I will be brief this morning. Even though I'm an opponent, I will start by saying I think the chair has been given a Herculean task and something that's been discussed now for many years. And while I'm still going to tell you why we don't like this bill in a minute, I do think that it does have a lot of things in it. She listened, and whoever helped her listen to some of the previous concerns, and they are in this bill. So give credit where credit is due, and we are appreciative of that. But now the part why I'm standing up here as an opponent. Couple brief points, and you've all asked some questions already, and I know you've got testimony that asks a lot of hypotheticals. Did this apply? If I have this concession stand, does it apply to this? If I'm running a golf course, does that mean the country club also gets a tax exemption, right? The problem is we don't have the answer to that because the only guidance in this bill primarily is competes against the business. There's not a lot left for the Department of Revenue to work from, or BOTA, if it gets that far, to say, okay, what are our criteria? And if any business has a good lawyer or a good accountant, they're going to work really hard to find a thread that shows we compete against that business. So if nothing else, this needs some more thresholds. Show that you're serving the same people or different people, or an economic loss, or something that gives some sort of threshold for that problem. Because as you know, the agency is always going to go back to the bill and say, we use the bare minimum approach because that's the direction we were given by the legislature. The concerning part to us really too of this bill is Section 1AB, where it defines a facility owned or operated by a governmental entity as any other facility that receives any funds from property or ad valorem taxes levied by a taxing subdivision. The first part of that is, as you most know, local budgets don't have a property tax budget. We get sales tax, property tax fees, and we put it all into a general fund. And so while we know where the money goes, we don't always know if something got sales tax money or property tax money. And that creates a little issue there. But more importantly, what happens, and this may be the extreme example, but that's what I'm up here to give, is we have several cities across the state who are giving money to child care facilities so that they can take in individuals who are suffering from domestic abuse and other horrific situations. Are they now a government entity because they're receiving funds while also getting paid? And what is the impact to all child care facilities across the county? The second thing for us is, how does this extend to any for-profit entity that receives funds as part of an economic incentive program? So for instance, here in Topeka, we have 3 TIF districts, tax increment financing districts. If you're in that district, you're receiving property tax benefits to improve that district. So if I'm a restaurant in that district, am I now a government entity, and do all the other restaurants have a case? We don't know the answer to that, but that needs some clarification. My last point is 2 very brief points. Just a reminder that government entities are not taxed as they provide public goods and programming, which anyone can access, and tax exemptions are to be utilized to encourage public benefit. Providing these tax breaks to for-profit entities that do not provide additional services to benefit the public good is not, from our perspective, an appropriate use of tax exemptions. And lastly, if you really want to do this, remember that a lot of these taxes we collect, especially property taxes, pay for police and fire. And these same companies are going to pick up the phone and call police and fire when they are in need. So you have restrictions on the legislature on pilot fees. We would love to open those up and let us have more wiggle room with our pilot fees across the state to make any offsets of losses to pay for those services. So I'm always open to questions at the appropriate time. Thank you, committee.
Would you stand for questions, please?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
If you have an
Committee,
hour
any
later.
questions? Senator Corson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. You touched on it there at the end. I think one of the challenges with doing something like this, and I'm thinking about Johnson County where this would probably have the largest fiscal impact, but to me, this would really be going backwards in a lot of the work the committee's done on property taxes, because I think we start exempting every single, Johnson County is basically a county full of restaurants and fitness centers. So if all of them stop paying property taxes, all of that burden is just going to go back on residential property owners. And I just worry that that's really going to backtrack a lot of the good work the committee's done, because I don't see where there's fat in the budget to cut millions and millions of dollars from goods and from basic services, and that's just going to go on residential property owners. Can you speak to that?
No, I think it's my testimony. I do make the point that our primary concern is every time you lose a commercial property, that doesn't mean that it puts the burden on a homeowner. I mean, so that's always something we're aware of that balance of not shifting the tax burden to fewer people. We want, I know this always sounds, we want a tax burden, if you will, on everybody so that over time we can lower it for everybody. That's our overall goal as a tax, when we look at tax policy.
Any other questions, committee? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Duncan, in your written testimony, there's a sentence that says, the League of Kansas Municipalities opposes policies that erode the overall tax base. So from that sentence, this committee can come to the understanding that the League opposes any and all tax cuts?
No, sir. In fact, I stood up here at the start of the session and supported the school tax holiday. What we want is to make sure that we look at each tax cut as it should be and what its impact is to the overall tax policy. There are absolutely tax cuts that can be beneficial on one end and others on the other side that can create more harm than good.
Duncan, that's not what your sentence says. It says that you oppose policies that erode the overall tax base, which would be sales, income, property tax.
And I will look at that word and make sure maybe it's a little too strong.
Thank you, Senator. Any other questions? Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is the fire department in all jurisdictions in Kansas, as well as the police departments, are they all run on property taxes?
Well, no, to my point about our municipal budgets is that we don't have a property tax budget, a sales tax budget, a fees budget. We have a general fund that it all goes into. So sure, I mean, do we rely on property taxes to help pay for those services? Sure, just as much as we rely on sales tax. So I'm not going to say that property taxes are the lone funder, but if you lose that base, then certainly you've got less money for those services.
Well, the reason I bring it up, at least I know in our community, it is run by property taxes, especially our police department, and solely run by property taxes. There isn't sales tax or income tax or other types of taxes that go into it, maybe a few fees here and there, but other than that. So when we talk about the tax burden going to your residents, these services will also be diminished because there's only a certain amount threshold that your local residents can handle as opposed to a for-profit business, let's say.
Sure, and as everyone knows, as everyone on this committee knows, counties rely much differently on property taxes than cities do, and we obviously represent the city aspect of it.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions for you. One of the statements you made was the concern about it being beyond just taxing authorities, government entities that are taxing authorities. I think if line 32 and 33 were deleted, section B, that,
The 1AB, I don't have it in front of me,
Yes.
sorry. That would be helpful, yeah, I mean, because that's our concern, or at least a better definition. Because like I said, if we're giving money to somebody and they're also collecting fees because we're a subsidy, and I think one of the examples I give is ambulance service. How does that impact subsidized for-profit ambulance services? Then we don't know how the Department of Revenue is going to look at that as competition.
understandable. I think by deleting that, that might clarify and at least
Yeah.
address the core of the problem. Also, the intent was not to include for-profits or nonprofits as competition. These were truly businesses being started and ran by governments is what the intent was. Would you be receptive if we were able to?
Well, that would help. I don't know if we could totally, but yes, I think that's one of our big concerns is that clarification in the bill.
Okay, great. Thank you. Committee, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Spencer.
Yep.
Next up is Sean Gatewood.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today. First, I probably just need to clarify that the testimony we submitted was actually the president of the KEMSA board. His name is David Adams. He's the executive director, or the service director at Riley County EMS, and I'm just here to kind of present that and answer questions, if you will. I think KEMSA's position on this bill our preference would be to just be written out of the bill. And I'll explain why. EMS is a little different. We're not, the highest cost for EMS is equipment and sort of the cost of being ready. So you have ambulances at a station, ambulance costs is, $500,000, you got a truck and all this. That's where the costs lie. And the significant payer source for EMS very frequently is facility to facility transfers. So going from a nursing home to a hospital to a hospital, that sort of thing. So in essence, what we have is the counties are required to provide EMS services, and then they would have to grant these sort of abatements while potentially somebody could move into a county and provide the facility to facility, the significant payer source transfers, but you would still be on the hook for that sort of cost of readiness and cost of fielding 911 calls. I will say that competition exists to a pretty fair extent in ambulance services already, as the county you're currently in is served by private ambulance service. Many of the counties that surround it are served by private ambulance services. And in the metros, we have transfer services that exist that just do transfers based on an agreement. And that's already done. It's that you lose that, potentially lose that payer source while also the county that is required to sort of make those payments to provide EMS service. It's kind of a double whammy. So our preference would be to be written out, and I'll stand for questions at the appropriate time.
So thank you. If the word ambulance was deleted on line 14, you guys would be receptive then?
I apologize.
That would write you out of the bill.
Yes, if you write me out of the bill, I'm very happy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify. Committee, any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Committee, next up is Mike Taylor. Welcome to the Tax Committee.
Thank you. I'm here representing the Kansas County Commissioners Association. If you look back at the history of this bill, it's been around for 5 or 6 years. It started out because the Stevens family in Wichita owns the Genesis Health Clubs, and they didn't think it was fair that they had to pay taxes and the YMCA didn't. The bill has taken a lot of variations over the years, and now it's grown so broadly that I don't know how you would decide what businesses are tax exempt and not. Here's one example. So what would happen under this bill? A guy owns a couple of lawn tractors and mows grass, could go to the local government and say, hey, I want to mow your parks. They say, well, we already have our own mowing crew. Okay, so you're competing with me. Oh, I based my business out of my house. I want my house taken off the tax rolls. The way the bill is written, it's that broad. That also would apply to noxious weeds and chemicals, road grading, pothole patching, municipal swimming pools and spray parks, golf courses, snacks sold at ball games in school or municipally owned stadiums or arenas. We just talked about ambulance services, so I won't mention that, but government-provided trash service, community-supported soup kitchens. There are a whole host of things that this bill is written so broadly, and we know that the Department of Revenue is kind of understanding orders to give deference to the taxpayer. So I would be honest, if I own a business and my CPA or my tax lawyer does not find a way for me to take advantage of this, I'm going to fire him because it's written that broadly. Thanks.
Will you stand for questions?
Sure.
Committee, any questions? No, seeing none, I would dispute that the bill is written that broadly, and especially if line 32 and 33 are deleted, then it would make it, they would have to be competing with government. But we'll take a look at it.
Okay, thank you.
So, thank you. Committee, our next conferee, Jay Hall, written opponent to the testimony. Are there any other opponents? Seeing none, I see that Eric is in the room. We will circle back to Eric Stafford if he would like to. Actually, if you want to testify, that's great. Otherwise, we're going to work a bill. It's your call. It's your call.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize for being late this morning. Good morning, committee members. I'm Eric Stafford with the Kansas Chamber. Do appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony in support of Senate Bill 252. Missing the first part, wasn't really sure what's been said, but I'll just start by saying that our Board of Directors has approved an item in our legislative agenda under government efficiency that just is a very straightforward statement that we oppose government competition with the private sector. We believe that it is just blatantly un-American for government entities to put private businesses that have tax liabilities and tax burdens in a position that they can't compete with entities that don't have the same fiscal constraints. We have seen policies or bills introduced in the past that have been brought by the Department of Corrections dealing with inmate training and expanding the programs that would allow those goods and services to then be sold at market in direct competition with companies that they're intending to partner with, but then they're creating the same products at a much lower cost through inmate labor. There's a difference between training for post-incarceration and competing with the private sector. So whether it's this policy or others that have been before you, we like to think we've stayed consistent, but we've seen a growth in fitness centers, restaurants that are owned by cities or counties, and they are in a direct competition with private businesses. And I know there have been, it was just stated by the previous conferee, that there have been previous efforts, and this is a newer version. And I think the other proponents of the bill have come up with a good attempt to address the unfairness that exists today. So, if we're open to other ideas and other solutions that those might have to address it. But do appreciate, Madam Chair, the opportunity to testify. Appreciate you accommodating us, and happy to answer questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
And I, just for the committees, for the record, I've never supported those pieces of legislation in the past. I think that's why they asked me to take a look at this, because it is bigger than just one industry. that we do have an issue. Committee, Jay Hall is online via WebEx. Jay, would you like to comment on the bill?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, and just for clarification, we are going back to the opponents.
Yes, and I'll be very brief. I think a lot of the comments today from the league and from the Kansas County Commissioners Association, I would point out just that typically local governments do not get involved in industries unless there is a gap. One of the things that I think is important to remember is that local governments provide services because there is either a request from their residents or because there is a need within the community. As I said in my testimony, we have a lack of childcare in our communities, and government stepping in to help provide that service. If the government were to step out of that space, that would not alleviate that issue. Entertainment, kind of the same way. Exercise and recreation, kind of the same way. If government were to step out of that space, it would just leave some people in the community without those services. It would not make those communities stronger. And so with those comments, I would stand for questions.
Thank you, Jay. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony, Jay.
Thank you.
Are there any other opponents? Seeing none, any neutral? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on Senate Bill 252. Committee, we're about out of time. I do know that Eddie has some information for us on Streamline. Would you like to? Yes, tax on the school sales tax holiday.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yesterday, the committee asked for some information as it relates to the way other states, and specifically Oklahoma and Missouri, handle their sales tax holidays. I want to start out by clarifying that Oklahoma is a Streamline member and Missouri is not. I have a copy of information that specifies the Missouri provision that I think JG and Amelia are going to help pass out. On the back page of this, it does provide the definitions that are pulled from their statute in terms of the items that qualify under that, under Missouri's holiday. You can see the list at the top: clothing, school supplies, computer software, personal computers, computer peripheral devices, and graphing calculators. And then several of those are specifically defined, and each of those do have an individual item price cap. So those are the definitions that Missouri uses. And so once again, keep in mind, Missouri is not a streamlined state. And so there's no concern within Missouri in terms of whether or not these definitions qualify for streamline. Oklahoma is a streamlined state. And I didn't print off the Oklahoma statute just because they didn't have a very printer-friendly version of it. And so it would have been 8 or 9 pages long. And but I can provide information. Oklahoma's sales tax holiday is limited to only clothing, and so the bill that the committee has been evaluating is Senate Bill 29, and you might note in the subsection A of Section 1 of Senate Bill 29, it provides for the Kansas holiday proposed under that bill to apply to clothing, clothing accessories or equipment, school supplies, school instructional materials, school art supplies, pre-written computer software, personal computers, and school computer supplies. And so that's 8 different items that would apply under the Kansas proposed holiday. Oklahoma only has their holiday apply to one of those 8 items, clothing specifically. That being said, the clothing definition utilized by the state of Oklahoma is the streamlined definition. And so on the first page of that bill, subsection B1, it uses that definition with the proposed amendments from yesterday that would bring that definition into conformity with streamline, but it does not include any of the sorts of definitions for clothing, accessories, and equipment that had proposed amendments yesterday related to jewelry, umbrella, cosmetics, things like that. And I'd be happy to stand for questions from the committee on this topic.
Thank you, Eddie. Any questions on this? Seeing none, thank you. Committee, since we are out of time today on working legislation, I would ask that we are meeting tomorrow at 8:30. Caucuses start at 9:30. We can start at 8 a.m. tomorrow and try to finish all of our work the first meeting. We do have a few bills to work. Or we can meet at noon again tomorrow, 8:30 and at noon again. What are the committee's wishes? Discussion on it. Let's take a vote on 8 a.m. or 8:30. All those in favor of 8 a.m., raise your hand. 2, 3, oh, okay, it passed. Then all those in favor of 8:30. Okay, 8 a.m. it is. So we will try to finish our work tomorrow between 8:30 and 9:30. 8, oh, I may not be here at 8, but the rest of you will be. So, thank you, committee. We're adjourned.